Welcome to cybersecurity under pressure. Real attacks, real lessons. Every breach starts with something small. A trusted login, a missed alert, a system no one thought could matter. Here, we follow the incident. How it began, how it moved, what broke under pressure, and what security engineering and business teams should learn before the next one. Because the next attack will not wait for a perfect plan. Now, let's follow the evidence.
Imagine that your fraud detection system has been disabled for 3 years and nobody knew it.
Oh, man.
I know. Take a second with that one. Because, while that sounds like an absolute nightmare scenario if you're, managing the risk portfolio for a major bank.
It's a career-ending scenario, honestly.
Right. But we are not talking about banking today. We're venturing deep into the world of operational technology, OT.
Yep, the physical world.
Exactly. We're talking about manufacturing plants, regional power grids, municipal water treatment facilities. In that specific world, a blind spot doesn't just mean a discrepancy on a spreadsheet or a financial write-off. A blind spot literally stops physical reality in its tracks.
It stops the assembly line dead, or, it forces a regional water supply to shut off its pumps to prevent contamination.
Yeah.
It turns off the lights for 1 million people. The stakes are entirely physical. And I think that's why treating this domain like a standard IT security problem is, well, it's getting us into so much profound trouble right now. We're trying to apply digital band-aids to massive kinetic machines.
It's a disaster. And, today's a Monday, July 6th, 2026, and looking at the sheer volume of alerts hitting the wire this morning, the landscape is frankly wild. What happens when technical details collide with the reality of the boardroom? This story answers that.
It really does. It's a collision that most organizations, even the highly resourced ones, are just entirely unprepared for. The technical debt is finally meeting the legal liability.
Absolutely. And we have a massive stack of sources to unpack for you today on this deep dive. We're pulling from the latest CISA advisories, so the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, some very fresh and frankly very alarming Siemens vulnerability reports, the European Union's NIS2 directive.
Which is actively reshaping global compliance right now.
Big time. And we've also got some cutting-edge OT architecture guides from specialized firms like Zona, Signia, and OT Nexus.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. Our mission for this deep dive is to explain exactly how industrial control systems are currently under absolute siege, why the traditional IT defenses you've trusted for a decade, how to survive the fallout when the screens go dark.
Yeah, because they will go dark.
They will.
Yeah.
So to do this justice, we have to start at the absolute boundary of the network. Because before we can even begin to talk about monitoring traffic or looking for anomalies inside a manufacturing plant, we need to look at how humans are getting into that network in the first place.
Right. The front door.
Yeah. And why the traditional so-called secure methods are actually just loaded traps waiting to be sprung.
You're talking about the corporate VPN.
I'm talking about the VPN, the virtual private network, the ubiquitous tool we all use, like every single day to check our email from a coffee shop or access the corporate intranet from home.
We all love it.
Right. But according to the Zona Protocol Isolation Guide we spent the weekend reviewing, traditional VPNs fundamentally, architecturally fail when you try to apply them to an OT environment.
They absolutely fail.
And the reason comes down to the mechanics of how they actually establish a connection. A VPN creates what's called a persistent network layer tunnel. Once that tunnel is authenticated and established, any network protocol, any port that is within the scope of that routing table is completely reachable.
Which is the fatal flaw when you bring it into an industrial space. Think about a normal corporate IT environment. You might mitigate the risk of that wide open tunnel with a ton of heavy endpoint controls.
Like what?
Well, you have constant antivirus patching, dynamic network segmentation, agent-based behavioral monitoring running on every single laptop.
Where the laptop itself is heavily guarded.
Oh, exactly. But in operational technology, you cannot do any of that. that. You're dealing with strict deterministic communication requirements, legacy operating systems from 20 years ago, and incredibly rigid safety certifications. You cannot just slap a heavy IT security agent on a 15-year-old controller running a gas turbine.
It would just crash the turbine.
Right. So when that VPN tunnel is created for a remote engineer to log in, native management protocols suddenly become natively reachable across zones. The tunnel bridges the gap.
Wow.
Suddenly, credentials can be harvested out of memory or replayed. A worm or some ransomware strain sitting quietly on that engineer's laptop can just casually stroll across the connection and find itself sitting right next to a critical safety system.
Okay, wait, let me stop you there because I was struggling with this when reading the Zona brief. If I have multi-factor authentication MFA turned on, isn't that enough? I mean, it works perfectly fine for my email.
I hear that all the time.
Right. Like if I have a hard token or I have to biometrically approve a push notification on my phone to establish the VPN tunnel, I've proven I am who I say I am. How is the malware bypassing that?
So that is the most common misunderstanding in remote access architecture. You are confusing identity with access.
Okay.
Let's try to visualize it. MFA verifies who you are. It proves cryptographically that the person holding the phone is the authorized user. But a VPN dictates how you enter the network and, more importantly, what you bring with you.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's less about my identity and more about the vehicle I'm driving into the plant.
Yes.
Like let's say I give someone the keys to my house. The MFA proves they are the specific person I intended to give the keys to. But once they unlock the front door, they're inside. They can walk into the kitchen, they can go into the basement, they can rifle through my desk.
Exactly.
The VPN gives their entire computer, including any hidden malware riding along in the background, the keys to the front door, and lets the device itself roam the house.
That is a perfect way to put it. And in a chemical processing plant or, a regional power substation, we absolutely do not want anyone roaming the house. We want them looking through a heavily reinforced bulletproof window at one specific object, a single machine, and they cannot touch or see anything else. That is the fundamental premise of protocol isolation.
Okay, so how does that actually work mechanically? If there is no tunnel, how am I controlling the machine?
It operates as a session-level mediation. So when a user initiates remote access using a platform designed for OT, like Zona, the inbound connection from their laptop is terminated completely at a gateway.
And this gateway is sitting where?
Sitting in the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. It usually terminates using standard HTTPS or TLS, transport layer security, and it stops right there. It completely removes the routable network path. There is no IP to IP connection between the user's laptop and the industrial machine.
The tunnel just doesn't exist.
It physically and logically does not exist. The user device never actually communicates directly with the OT asset. It never participates in the protocol negotiation at all.
Wow.
The isolation gateway terminates your web session, validates who you are, and then the gateway itself establishes a separate, entirely localized session to the target asset inside the plant. It basically translates your mouse clicks and keystrokes into whatever native protocol is required by that legacy machine.
Like remote desktop protocol, RDP.
Yeah, RDP or virtual network computing, VNC.
Which means, if I'm understanding the architecture correctly, even if my remote laptop is completely infected with a self-propagating ransomware worm,
Yep.
because there's no network layer tunnel, the malware literally has no physical or logical path to traverse into the plant. It hits the gateway and dies because the gateway is only passing pixels and keystrokes.
Precisely. The protocol execution is entirely isolated. The malware cannot route itself because there is no route. And, this architectural shift ties directly into how we have to handle credentials in these environments, which is its own total nightmare.
Oh, I bet.
In OT, credentials are notoriously messy. Because of the nature of shift work, accounts are often shared among 5 different operators. Or worse, administrative passwords are just hard-coded and embedded into automated engineering workflows.
That's terrifying.
It is. If you rely on a VPN, a compromised technician's laptop that has a shared factory password saved in a text file on the desktop is a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, I was reading the section on credential injection, and it honestly feels like magic compared to how IT usually handles this.
Yeah.
With protocol isolation, the user never actually sees, types, or handles the passwords for the end devices.
Never, because they shouldn't.
Right.
The user authenticates to the external gateway via their identity provider using your beloved MFA.
Right.
And once their identity is proven, the gateway retrieves the required credentials for the specific OT asset from a highly secure encrypted vault. The gateway then injects those credentials directly into the isolated session it creates on the back end.
So the password never traverses the internet. It never touches the user's laptop. It cannot be stolen by a phishing attack targeting the user. It can't be reused outside that specific mediated session. And a stolen password alone is completely useless without the identity and session context to trigger the injection.
It aligns perfectly with true zero trust principles. I mean, zero trust is a massive buzzword right now, but its core definition demands that we assume a breach has already occurred on the endpoint. You must assume every laptop connecting to your network is hostile.
Which is a grim way to look at it, but necessary.
Very necessary. If we assume the engineer's laptop is compromised, granting it a VPN tunnel is a death sentence for the facility. Protocol isolation contains the blast radius by simply eliminating the path. You don't have to worry about detecting the malware crossing the tunnel if you don't build the tunnel in the first place.
Which naturally brings us to the internal network. Because even if we isolate our remote access perfectly, we know the perimeter is essentially porous. We were looking at the Fortinet 2025 report earlier this week, and the data show that 75% of all OT attacks actually start as a breach on the corporate IT side.
Yep, 3/4.
Someone in human resources clicks a bad link, the corporate network is compromised, and the attackers pivot laterally into the manufacturing side. We have to operate under the assumption that the attackers are already inside the house.
You have to. The idea of a hard outer shell and a soft, trusted internal network is an illusion. It has been for a long time.
So we must monitor the inside of the plant. We have to look for lateral movement, command and control beacons, unauthorized configuration changes. But the literature from OT Nexus and Scatahawk makes it abundantly clear that monitoring an operational technology network is fundamentally different from monitoring an office network. It all stems from what you called earlier the sacred rule of OT. Do no harm.
Determinism. If you walk into any industrial facility and talk to a process control engineer, determinism is the concept they will defend with their lives.
How did that differ from IT?
In an IT network, if you try to load a web page and the network is congested, the packets might get delayed or dropped. The web page takes 3 extra seconds to load. You get annoyed, but life goes on. That is non-deterministic. In OT, determinism means that a specific digital signal must reach its destination within a guaranteed exact mathematical time frame. Not as fast as possible, but at an exact microsecond.
Because if a massive chemical mixing vat is approaching a critical pressure limit and the safety controller sends a command to open a release valve, and that command is delayed by 2 seconds because the network was congested with IT traffic,
The valve doesn't open in time.
and the vat explodes.
Literally, the physical process fails catastrophically. The tolerances are incredibly tight. And this is exactly why traditional IT monitoring tools are so profoundly dangerous when deployed blindly in OT environments. IT tools are loud. They love active scanning. Think about how a vulnerability scanner works on a corporate network.
Okay.
It aggressively sends out thousands of packets, pinging devices, probing ports, asking, who are you? What operating system are you running? Are you alive? Send me your version number.
Right. And on a corporate network, Windows and Mac laptops are built to handle that noise. They just reply, hey, I'm a Windows 11 machine, and move on.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting. In an IT network, it's fine. But in OT, doing that active scanning is like, well, it's like taking inventory in a warehouse by walking in with a megaphone and screaming at every single worker to drop what they're doing, yell their name back to you, and list everything they're carrying.
That is exactly what it's like. And in a human warehouse, productivity grinds to a halt and people hate you. But in an OT environment, the outcome is much worse. We're dealing with legacy programmable logic controllers, PLCs.
Right.
These are essentially small, ruggedized computers designed to interface directly with physical sensors and motors. They have incredibly fragile, minimal network stacks. They're built to do one physical task perfectly, millions of times in a row, for 20 years. They are not built to handle unexpected malformed packets or aggressive TCP/SO access handshakes from a modern IT vulnerability scanner.
So what happens when you hit them with one?
If you shout at a legacy PLC with an active scan, it doesn't know how to drop the packet. Its memory buffer overflows. It doesn't answer you. It just crashes. It goes into a fault state, and the assembly line halts immediately.
Wow. I remember reading an incident report where a security team accidentally shut down an entire automotive manufacturing line because they ran an IT ping sweep across the factory subnet. It cost them millions in downtime.
Happens more often than you'd think.
Which is why the architectural guides emphasize the absolute, non-negotiable necessity of passive monitoring. You have to observe the network traffic without generating a single packet of your own. Going back to the warehouse analogy, it's like installing silent cameras in the rafters. You watch the natural flow of work. You see who is talking to whom, but you never interrupt the process.
You listen to the existing communication between devices. Usually this is done by configuring a span port on a network switch, which takes a copy of all the traffic passing through and mirrors it silently to your monitoring sensor. You build your asset inventory, your topology maps, and your understanding of the environment entirely from what you see passively on the wire. You never ask a device a direct question.
But to do that effectively, your monitoring platform has to actually speak the native languages of the plant floor, right?
Exactly. It can't just parse standard TCP/IP web traffic. It has to have deep native OT protocol support. The guides mentioned it needs to understand Modbus TCP, Profinet, DNP3, OPC-UA.
I gotta be honest, these are protocols I had never even heard of before, looking at this stack of research.
And that is the exact problem many IT security teams face. If your monitoring tool only understands standard IT protocols, it is blind to 90% of what is actually happening in a manufacturing facility. Modbus TCP, for example, is one of the most common industrial protocols in the world. It's ancient, it's unencrypted, and it operates entirely in clear text.
Really, just clear text.
Just clear text. It is basically just a protocol for reading and writing memory registers on a PLC. If your monitoring tool doesn't know how to decode a Modbus packet, it might see that an engineering workstation is talking to a PLC, but it has no idea what they're saying. Are they exchanging a routine temperature status update? Or is the workstation sending a command to shut down the primary safety cooling pump? Without deep packet inspection tailored for OT protocols, you're just looking at static.
And the threat landscape taking advantage of that static is staggering.
Yeah.
I want to bring in the Dragos 2026 report data we reviewed. They actively tracked 119 different ransomware groups that are now specifically, purposely targeting industrial organizations. That impacted over 3,300 organizations globally last year alone.
It's massive. Add the Trellix report from late 2025 to that context. Manufacturing is now definitively the #1 targeted sector globally. 42% of all OT cyber attacks hit the manufacturing sector.
That is more than the energy sector, more than transportation, more than water. Why manufacturing? You would think power grids would be the prime target for nation-states?
Nation-states, yes, they want the grid. But cyber criminals operate on economics. Attackers know that downtime in manufacturing costs millions of dollars per day, sometimes per hour. It's the ultimate leverage for extortion. A hospital might pay a ransom to save lives, but a manufacturer will pay a ransom in hours just to stop bleeding cash.
That makes total sense.
And these attackers aren't just doing smash and grab operations anymore. They are pre-positioning silently inside these networks. Sometimes they sit there for weeks or months, learning the process, finding the most critical PLCs. If you don't have passive monitoring establishing a behavioral baseline, they are completely invisible until the ransom note prints out on the factory floor.
So let's talk about how we actually detect them when we are monitoring passively. The IC3 guide draws a really critical distinction regarding detection methodologies. First, they talk about baseline-based detection. This uses machine learning and statistical models to identify deviations from normal behavior.
Right.
If a PLC usually sends 50 packets a minute to a human-machine interface, the HMI screen the operator watches, and suddenly that PLC starts sending 5,000 packets a minute, the baseline model flags it as an anomaly and triggers an alert.
Yes, baseline detection is highly effective for spotting novel, unknown threats, like a new ransomware strain trying to spread. But it has a significant flaw.
What's that?
It requires a perfectly clean learning window. If the attacker is already inside your network when you turn on the monitoring tool, the tool learns the attacker's behavior as normal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Furthermore, statistical models might miss very quiet, highly targeted edge cases. A sophisticated attacker might only send one single malicious command packet. A baseline model looking for volume anomalies will just completely miss it.
Which is why the guide heavily stresses specification-based detection as the necessary counterpart.
Exactly. Specification-based detection doesn't care about what is normal based on observation. It defines the absolute mathematical range of valid behaviors, almost like a digital safety system. You sit down with the process engineers and you define the operational state machine. You hard code rules based on engineering reality.
I can see the IT side struggling with this. I mean, how do you even build a specification for a 20-year-old plant where the original engineers have all retired?
It is incredibly difficult, which is why it usually focuses on the most critical safety choke points. For example, you build a rule that says, this specific engineering workstation on this specific IP address during these specific maintenance hours is the only device allowed to send a firmware update command to this critical turbine PLC.
And if anything else tries?
If any other device tries it at any other time, it's not just flagged as an anomaly, it's recognized as a direct violation of the engineering specification. It triggers a massive alarm.
So if we step back, we have our remote protocols perfectly isolated. We are passively monitoring everything with deep protocol visibility. We're using both baseline and specification detection. We're doing everything by the book.
Perfect setup.
But all of this relies on the physical network infrastructure actually enforcing these rules. What happens when the physical devices enforcing our network zones, the managed industrial switches, are fundamentally cryptographically flawed?
Then the entire architecture collapses like a house of cards. The logical zones you've drawn on a whiteboard just cease to exist in reality.
We need to talk about one of the most terrifying vulnerabilities I've read about in a long time. Let's dig into the Radius protocol and the industrial switch. We have the Siemens Security Advisory SSA 723487 and a very closely related, deeply urgent CISA advisory regarding Schneider Electric Modicon industrial switches.
We are talking about the vulnerability designated as CVE 2024-3596. It has been dubbed Blastradius by the security community. It carries a CVSS severity score of 9.1 out of 10.
Which is astronomical.
It is. And it doesn't attack an endpoint or a PLC. It attacks the absolute core of how network devices authenticate the administrators trying to manage them.
Okay, let's break this down for anyone who hasn't stared at a network packet capture recently. Radius's remote authentication dial-in user service. It's a protocol used for centralized authentication.
Right.
If I am an administrator and I want to log into an industrial managed switch to change a configuration or update a firewall rule, I type in my password. The switch acting, as the client takes my request, wraps it up, and asks the central Radius server over the network, hey, this guy's trying to log in with his password. Is he legit?
That is exactly how it works. It allows you to manage passwords in one central database instead of updating them manually on 500 different switches. But Blastradius exploits a fundamental mathematical flaw in how the Radius protocol, specifically when using UDP as its transport layer, validates the response coming back from that central server.
Wait, how does it validate it?
Radius relies on the MD5 hashing algorithm to create a digital signature for the packet, ensuring it hasn't been tampered with in transit. And we have known for over a decade that MD5 is cryptographically weak.
I remember learning about MD5 collisions years ago. A hash is just like a mathematical fingerprint of a file or a packet.
Yeah.
If you change even one letter in the packet, the resulting hash fingerprint should be completely, wildly different.
Exactly.
But MD5 is broken, meaning you can theoretically find two completely different files that accidentally produce the exact same fingerprint.
Yeah.
But this attack, Blastradius, is a chosen prefix collision attack. Reading how this actually works physically hurt my brain.
It is brilliant and it is devastating. Let's map it out. To execute this, you need an on-path attacker. This means an attacker who has already gained a minor foothold on the network. Maybe they compromised a low-level device, and they're sitting logically between the target switch and the Radius server.
So they can see the traffic passing by.
Yes. The attacker attempts to log into the managed switch using a completely fake password.
So the switch says, hold on, let me check, and sends the authentication request to the Radius server. The Radius server looks at the fake password, laughs, and generates an access reject message to send back to the switch.
Precisely. But before that access reject message can reach the switch, our on-path attacker intercepts it in transit. They capture the packet. Now, because of the specific chosen prefix MD5 vulnerability, the attacker can mathematically forge the hash and alter the payload of the packet on the fly.
Wait, they don't just change the message, they have to make the math line up perfectly so the switch doesn't realize it's been tampered with.
Right. They flip the access reject command into an access accept command. Then, they append carefully calculated junk data, the collision block, into the packet so that when the switch calculates the MD5 hash upon receiving it, the fingerprint miraculously matches the original legitimate signature of the server.
That is insane. The attacker forwards this mathematically perfect forged packet to the switch. The switch receives it, checks the hash, assumes the central authentication server just approved the login, and grants the attacker full, unhindered administrative access to the network switch.
Full access.
No valid credentials needed, no noisy brute forcing of passwords required, they just mathematically lie to the door.
And they are in.
Wait, no, that's not right. If the switch is compromised, doesn't the whole concept of network segmentation just vanish?
Yes, it entirely vanishes, and that is the dark, uncomfortable reality of OP security that many executives refuse to acknowledge. An industrial managed switch is not just a piece of dumb IT plumbing routing packets. It is the device where the plant's entire trust model becomes a physical reality.
In all the architecture guides like IEC 62443, they talk constantly about zones and conduits. You isolate the highly volatile chemical mixing zone from the mundane packaging zone. You create strict rules about what data can flow between them. But those zones are just logical concepts, just drawings on a PowerPoint slide, until a managed switch physically enforces them using virtual local area networks, VLANs, and access control lists.
If the device managing those VLANs is hijacked, your zones are gone. Or consider RSTP, the Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. Switches use this to prevent network loops, ensuring traffic flows smoothly. An attacker with control of the switch can manipulate RSTP to create a loop, causing a broadcast storm that overwhelms every device on the network.
Wow, effectively shutting down the entire plant floor without ever touching a PLC.
Exactly. They can reroute traffic to bypass firewalls, open hidden ports, and crucially, they can disable the span ports you're using for your passive monitoring. They can blind your security team entirely while they move laterally across the facility.
So how on earth do we mitigate a 9.1 CVSS vulnerability in a core protocol? I mean, the Siemens advisory outlines a few specific countermeasures, but they sound incredibly difficult to implement in an active plant. The primary recommendation is requiring the message authenticator attribute in all radius packets.
This attribute essentially forces the protocol to use a stronger cryptographic check, bypassing the vulnerable MD5 collision point. But it's not a simple switch you flip. It requires that both the switch firmware and the Radius server software are updated to support and strictly mandate this attribute.
Which sounds easy in IT, but...
In OT, it's a nightmare. If you mandate it on the server but a legacy switch doesn't support it, that switch can no longer authenticate administrators. You lock yourself out. And patching the firmware on a core network switch requires taking the network down. You need a scheduled maintenance window, which for a power plant could take 6 months to a year to approve and schedule.
Which makes the secondary mitigation strategy outlined by CISA absolutely critical right now. If you can't patch, you must strictly isolate the management plane.
You cannot allow Radius authentication traffic to mix with general plant floor communication. You have to restrict access to the specific network segments where these management messages are exchanged. Typically, you do this by putting all switch management interfaces on a highly restricted, dedicated management VLAN and wrapping it in strict firewall rules.
Because the attack requires the attacker to be on path. If they cannot physically or logically get onto the management VLAN to intercept the Radius traffic in the first place, they cannot execute the collision attack even if the protocol remains vulnerable.
Precisely. You contain the risk.
It is just a stark reminder that the very tools we use to build the defensive walls, the switches, the centralized authentication servers, can become the easiest doors for the attackers to walk through. And because these deeply technical details, like an MD5 hash collision, can literally cause a municipal water supply to halt operations, governments are completely losing their patience. We're witnessing a massive, historic collision between the technical reality we just described and the legal reality of the boardroom.
The era of executives standing in front of a regulatory committee and saying, "We didn't understand the cyber risks, it was an IT problem," is over. The legal liability has fundamentally shifted, and it is catching a lot of corporate boards completely off guard.
Enter the NIS2 directive in the European Union. This piece of legislation went into effect in October 2024 with major, highly targeted amendments finalized just a few months ago in January 2026. It is sweeping. It covers 18 critical sectors: energy, transport, banking, and water, sure. but it also aggressively expands into waste management, public electronic communications, postal services, and the manufacturing of critical products like pharmaceuticals and medical devices.
And the most vital structural shift in NIS2 is not the technical requirements. It is the introduction of direct personal accountability for top management.
Say more about that.
The directive explicitly states that the management bodies of these essential entities must approve the cybersecurity risk management measures, oversee their implementation, and critically, they can be held personally legally liable for non-compliance if a major incident occurs.
It is dragging cybersecurity directly into the boardroom by the lapels. The board can no longer just outsource this complex risk to the chief information security officer, look at a dashboard showing green check marks once a quarter, and consider their fiduciary duty fulfilled.
The regulators recognize that without executive skin in the game, security budgets are always the first to be cut. And to manage this massive new regulatory framework at a macro level, NIS2 legally established a coordinated network of computer security incident response teams, or CSIUTs, across member states.
Right, and it also established the EU Cyclone Network. This stands for the Cyber Crisis Liaison Organization Network, designed specifically for coordinating responses to large-scale, cross-border cyber crises. If a ransomware group hits a major logistics provider operating across France, Germany, and Italy, Cyclone ensures a unified, government-level response.
But all of this macro-level regulation demands very specific, granular, technical implementation at the factory level.
Exactly. The law tells you what you must achieve, but it doesn't tell you how to wire your network. Which brings us to IEC 62443. If NIS2 is the law telling you that you must be secure or face ruinous fines and liability, IEC 62443 is the globally recognized technical blueprint showing you exactly how to build that security.
It is the definitive global standard for industrial automation and control system security. And it is structured in a very deliberate, layered way across 4 distinct areas. You have Part 1, the policies and procedures, which defines the management system and risk assessment processes.
Okay.
Part 2 is the system requirements, which covers the architectural design at a macro level. Part 3 is the component requirements, which actually dictates how vendors like Siemens or Rockwell must build secure features into their PLCs and switches. And Part 4 contains profiles for specific industries, adapting the rules for a pipeline versus, say, a pharmaceutical lab.
And a core tenet running through all of IEC 62443 is that concept of zones and conduits we keep coming back to. You logically group physical assets with similar security requirements and risk levels into zones. Think of them like watertight bulkheads on a submarine. And then you strictly, rigorously control the conduits, the network paths between them.
Right.
But here is the massive friction point when the technical blueprint of 62443 meets the legal hammer of NIS2. Compliance demands evidence.
You cannot just present an auditor with a beautifully drawn Visio diagram showing your zones and conduits. You have to mathematically, technically prove that those zones are actively enforced every single second of the day.
So what does this all mean? It sounds like the difference between telling a judge you're a good driver versus handing over your dash cam footage.
That is the perfect analogy. In an OT environment facing regulatory scrutiny, your dash cam is your unalterable continuous audit trail. This is where the monitoring platforms we discussed, like OT Nexus and ScadaHawk, transform from being just security tools into vital compliance engines.
How so?
If a national regulator walks into your facility following an incident and asks to see your network segmentation enforcement, they want proof. You have to pull the date-stamped, cryptographically signed log showing that when an unauthorized connection from the IT network attempted to cross the conduit into the OT zone, the system detected it, alerted on it, the firewall blocked it, and the Security Operations Center formally responded.
Without that telemetry, an audit is just a failure waiting to happen. You need deep event logging, you need granular change management tracking. If a maintenance engineer plugs in a laptop and updates the logic code on a PLC governing a chemical mixing ratio, the system must record who did it, at what exact time, and what specific lines of code changed.
Because under NIS2, if that PLC code change causes a toxic spill or a safety incident, and you do not have an audit trail proving you followed security procedures, the executives are personally, legally exposed to negligence claims.
Compliance theater is dead. We are firmly in the era of evidence-based governance. You must prove your security posture every day. But here is the sobering reality we have to address. Even with the best governance, the most rigorous executive oversight, the best protocol isolation at the perimeter, the most comprehensive passive monitoring, and a fully patched Radius authentication server, the core tenet of Zero Trust dictates that we must assume a breach will eventually happen. We have to assume a highly resourced attacker will find a zero-day vulnerability and bypass all of it.
Which leads us to the final and, frankly, the most terrifying chapter of this deep dive. When the mitigations fail. When the screens on the factory floor suddenly go dark. When the ransomware extortion note pops up on the HMI terminal and the physical plant grinds to a chaotic halt. How do you get physical reality running again?
You turn to your last ultimate line of defense, your OT backup and recovery strategy. And I need to be brutally clear here. If a manufacturing plant thinks they can just rely on their standard enterprise IT backup system to restore their industrial controllers, they are in for a very, very bad day.
We spent hours reading through the Signia Guide to OT backup strategies, and it outlines exactly why traditional IT backups fail so spectacularly in industrial environments. IT backups, like a central agent running on a Windows server backing up to a cloud repository, are built for dynamic data, centralized management, and unified policies.
Right.
OT environments are an entirely different beast. They are incredibly static in their configurations, but they are supported by a wildly, almost comically fragmented vendor ecosystem.
It is chaos. In a single manufacturing plant, you might have Siemens PLCs controlling the main line, Rockwell automation controllers managing the packaging, legacy Schneider electric HMIs on the walls, all running different, heavily proprietary, closed-source operating systems.
Yeah.
Some of these devices haven't had a firmware update in a decade because they are certified for safety and cannot be touched. A centralized IT backup agent literally cannot be installed on a proprietary embedded controller from 2005. I kept asking myself while reading this, why can't we just throw all this PLC logic, all these tiny configuration files, into the cloud like I do with my smartphone photos?
Yeah.
We have immense bandwidth now. I back up gigabytes of photos from my phone to a cloud server every night. Why can't a power plant just push its configs to an AWS bucket?
Because you have to account for the physical chaotic reality of a major ransomware attack. When a sophisticated threat actor group hits a manufacturing plant, they spread as fast as possible. The very first action the incident response team takes when they realize what is happening is to sever the network connections. They physically pull the cables or shut down the core routers, they cut the plant off from the internet entirely, and they often sever the connection to the corporate IT network to stop the lateral movement of the malware.
If the plant network is intentionally severed to stop the bleeding, a cloud backup repository is completely, totally inaccessible. It might as well be stored on the moon.
Exactly. When the plant is dark and the network is down, you need offline physical backup sitting in a fireproof safe right next to the machine on the factory floor. The Signia Guide highlights the absolute necessity of maintaining specialized recovery devices, like a ruggedized Siemens Field PG.
What's that?
For those unfamiliar, a Field PG is essentially a heavily armored, incredibly thick industrial laptop. It comes with all the necessary legacy serial ports, and most importantly, it has all the proprietary, heavily licensed vendor software pre-installed and authenticated. You keep the critical PLC configuration files and the compiled project logic stored securely offline on the encrypted hard drive of that specific device.
So if a PLC on the floor is bricked or encrypted by an attacker, an engineer can walk up to it in the dark, plug the rugged Field PG directly into the controller with the physical serial cable, and manually push the clean logic back onto the device without needing a network connection.
Yes, but the logic is only half the battle. What if the ransomware payload intentionally corrupted the firmware? Or what if the hardware itself fails during the chaotic shutdown? You must maintain what the industry calls deployment-ready spare hardware, hot swaps.
So just physical backups of the machines themselves.
Yeah. You need a physical, identical spare PLC sitting in a locked cabinet on the factory floor, pre-configured with the baseline firmware, ready to be physically slotted into the rack and loaded from that offline backup.
The logistics of that are mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You essentially need a shadow inventory of your most critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
But the guide points out it's not just the PLCs. It's the HMIs, the human-machine interfaces, and the massive engineering workstations that manage them. For those full-scale servers, the Signia Guide aggressively stresses the need for bare metal recovery.
Bare metal recovery, or BMR, means your backup solution must support restoring the full system state. The underlying operating system, the registry, the applications, the exact configurations all at once as a single image directly onto brand new blank hardware. It bypasses the need to manually reinstall Windows or Linux, then reinstall the drivers, then reinstall the software. In a crisis, when you are losing millions of dollars an hour, you do not have the time to rebuild complex engineering servers from scratch.
And reading through the guide, The biggest hurdle to bare metal recovery isn't the data size, it's the nightmare of hardware-bound licenses, or HBLs. I hadn't even considered this layer of complexity. Some incredibly expensive industrial software licenses are mathematically tied to the specific MAC address of the network card, or the physical serial number of the motherboard of the server it was originally installed on.
It's an aggressive form of digital rights management.
It is a massive crushing pain point during an active recovery. Imagine the scenario. Your primary engineering server is fully encrypted by ransomware. You do everything right. You grab a brand new spare server from the IT closet. You successfully execute a bare metal restore from an offline backup. The server boots up. The operating system loads. You click on the critical OT management software to get the plant running, and the software wakes up, scans the hardware, realizes it's on a different motherboard with a different MAC address, invalidates its own license, and stubbornly refuses to run.
Just brutal. The factory is burning down, and the software is asking you to insert a licensing dongle or call customer support. So your backup and recovery strategy has to include meticulous management of licensed backup utilities, physical USB dongles, or pre-mapped transfer mechanisms outlined in a playbook.
It takes immense planning. You also have to utilize agent-free backup operations whenever possible. Instead of installing a heavy IT backup agent that might crash the legacy OT software, you use native tools like Microsoft's Volume Shadow Copy Service, VSS. VSS allows the system to take a point-in-time snapshot of the hard drive without freezing the running applications or interrupting the determinism of the OT processes.
And finally, you must have absolute ironclad tamper protection for these backups. Because modern attackers are incredibly smart. They know that if you have clean, accessible backups, you will simply wipe your machines and you won't pay their ransom. So their first objective upon entering the network isn't to encrypt the plant, it's to quietly hunt for your backup servers, delete the archives, or encrypt the backups first before they trigger the main attack on the PLCs.
Which is why you must use immutable storage. Immutable storage is a technology where data, once written to the disk, is mathematically locked. It cannot be altered, overwritten, or deleted for a set period of time, say 30 days, not even by a user with top-level administrative privileges. If the attacker gains full control of the network and issues a command to delete the backup repository, the storage array simply rejects the command.
It is wild to think about the physical reality of this. Your ability to recover a modern, hyper-connected, smart manufacturing facility relies entirely on having a completely offline, ruggedized laptop in a safe, a closet full of physical spare parts, immutable hard drives, and literal paper printouts of cause and effect matrices and input-output lists.
Paper printouts?
Yes. The absolute certainty of your physical offline backups dictates whether you are forced to hand millions of dollars to a cyber cartel, or if you can look them in the eye and actually restore operations on your own terms. It is the ultimate defining paradox of modern industry. As IT and OT rapidly converge to make our physical industries smarter, more efficient, and more remotely connected, the very cybersecurity tools, the VPNs, and the network switches meant to protect the physical world are becoming the primary vectors used to attack it. Our safety, our water, our power relies entirely on trusting the untrustable.
That's all for this episode of Cybersecurity Under Pressure. Real attacks, real lessons. Technical details matter. The board's perspective matters. But what matters most is what you do with both of them tomorrow.
You have been listening to Cybersecurity Under Pressure. Real attacks, real lessons. Real incidents leave real lessons. Stay prepared. Stay critical. And keep following the evidence.